Good morning and welcome back to Rising. It is Monday morning. We've got another great show prepared for you today. I'm joined by Niall Stanage, who I am always delighted to see.
Delighted to see you too, Robby. How was your weekend?
It was good. I did some traveling. I spoke at Hillsdale College, which is in my native Michigan, and I was able to visit some of my family members after that. So it was a nice family-filled weekend.
Excellent. Well, we had a similar but different weekend. I was in New York, which is where I lived for the first 8 years. I was in America, so I was delighted to be back there for the weekend. But we're back here. We've lots to talk about, so why don't you tell me what is on your radar?
Yes, lots to get to. Let's get started. President Trump is stepping up efforts to follow through on his campaign process to deport violent illegal immigrant gang members, with ICE now targeting suspected members of the gang Tren De Aragua. Tren De Aragua has been designated a foreign terrorist group by Trump. Even the Biden administration had deemed it a transnational criminal organization. This Venezuelan gang is a menace. It's responsible for horrific violence here in the U.S. and also in South America. It is absolutely appropriate to detain members of this criminal terrorist gang and either incarcerate them or ship them back to South America. Illegal immigrants who commit other crimes and are members of illegal gangs, they should be deported. And if their ultimate fate is to languish in a prison in Venezuela or El Salvador, that's just fine by me. But it's important, critically important, to make sure that the people being delivered to this fate are actually illegal immigrant gang members. That's why so many people are disturbed by recent news reports that some of the migrants placed on deportation flights and shipped out have been identified as gang members based solely on their tattoos. Venezuelan authorities disputed that deported migrants are actually members of Tren De Aragua. Now, it's true that even if an illegal immigrant is not a member of a criminal gang, yes, they still did commit the crime of entering the country illegally, so they don't have some ironclad right to remain in the U.S., fine, but that doesn't mean we should be comfortable with the federal government grabbing people and flying them away on mere suspicion. That could happen to illegal immigrants who committed no other crime. It could also happen to American citizens who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. We don't want some situation where jackbooted government thugs grab random people on suspicion of being illegal, say they don't like the way their tattoos look, and then send them to South America without due process to a South American prison. The onus is on the government to prove that an individual is not an American citizen and is not law-abiding. If they have that evidence and that evidence persuades a judge or jury, then it's okay. But it's not our responsibility to prove that we are citizens. The burden of proof is on the government. That's how justice works. The presumption of innocence isn't some shield for criminals. It's a basic principle of Western justice. Better 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison. Our cherished Bill of Rights, our very post-Enlightenment conception of right and wrong, is based on that idea. So that's why I was very concerned to hear border czar Tom Homan invert this very basic principle in a recent interview. Let's watch.
How do you, what we've heard from lawyers representing some of these people is that they deny that they're members of this gang, or either, Tren De Aragua or MS-13. Do they get a chance to prove that before you take them out of the country and put them into a notorious prison in a country that they're not even from? Do they have any due process at all?
Confident. Look, due process. Where's Laken Riley's due process? Where were all these young women that were killed and raped by members of TDA? Where was their due process?
Well, the people that did that should be prosecuted.
On the subway, where's her due process?
Well, sure.
The bottom line is that plane was full of people designated as terrorists. Number one. Number two, every Venezuelan migrant on that flight was a TDA member based on numerous criminal investigations, on intelligence reports, and a lot of work by ICE officers.
Homan cites Laken Riley, who was viciously murdered by an illegal immigrant. Her killer was given, correctly, due process and was rightly convicted. That's how things are done in this country. Even the very obviously guilty deserve the presumption of innocence, access to legal counsel, and then to be tried before a jury of their peers. Be very, very wary of government officials, be they Republicans or Democrats, who try to persuade you that fundamental constitutional rights are suddenly up for negotiation or a little too precious at these times of heightened danger. We, the American people, have always come to regret our decision to let the federal government overlook civil liberties in the name of safety or national security or defense. In my lifetime, Republican leaders did this with the Patriot Act in response to 9/11, with an assist, of course, from many Democrats. And then Democrats did this with the COVID response, with an assist from many Republicans. Ask yourself, do you think we're better off because we enshrined a vast domestic spying apparatus due to fears of Islamic terrorism? Are we better off having empowered the government to decide whether gatherings of such and such numbers of people are a threat to public health? I suspect most of you recognize these public policy choices were mistakes. We should have more zealously guarded our liberties. Violence is a problem in this country, and it's clear that the government should do more to tackle illegal immigration. I get that. I don't disagree. But we must not abandon due process as we pursue this goal. We regret it every time we do it. So I don't think I'll get much disagreement from you today, Niall, but as I was listening to Tom Homan, this is very dangerous, and I support the goal of deporting illegal immigrants who are members of Tren De Aragua. But then when he says, well, we have designated them as such, I'm like, well, but the problem, we need the due process, because what if you designated someone who is an American citizen as such? That's why there has to be due process to make sure your designation is proper. That's just a very basic understanding of why we need due process when the government tries to do something. And then saying, well, what happened to Laken Riley, which is horrible and absolutely should have been handled with that person being brought to justice as it was. Well, that's not a reason to stop having due process and civil liberties. You could say that about any bad thing that happens.
Right, and the other thing that I was struck by when he cited the Laken Riley example is that really how low we're setting the bar, that the government of the United States is not aspiring to any higher moral standard than somebody who just murders a young student in the most horrific manner possible. You're right in that this is a harmonious start to the show, and that I didn't really disagree with anything that you said. I thought the most important thing, in a way, was your reiteration of the fact that the burden of proof lies with the government. And I think that is really, really important. The government can bring all sorts of resources and levers to bear to try to make its case against any individual person. If it fails to do that, then that's on the government. And this argument that suggesting that people should get due process is being on the side of terrorists or on the side of criminals, I've no time for at all. Like you, I think that obviously if people commit grievous crimes, those crimes should be prosecuted, and those people, if found guilty, should be punished. But for people like Homan to just say, for example, we've removed terrorists with no proof at all of that, and say that that should be grounds for celebration, I don't find it grounds for celebration whatsoever.
And the way they're getting at this, which does have a kernel of truth to it, is that people in the country illegally who are not citizens might have, some courts have found, depending on circumstance, this came up with the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University student, that if you're not an American citizen, the rights you have may be different. And that could be you don't have some right to remain in the country. Fine, sure, but it's obviously the case that due process still must apply, because how do we know you're not a citizen? Like, that has to be a process too, or else you could end up with a situation where American citizens, say you don't care, say, whatever, say you're someone who thinks if you're in the country illegally, you have no rights, the government can grab you, ship you out of the country, they can ship you to a prison in South America, boo-hoo, you shouldn't have come here. I'm sure there are lots of people who feel that way. Okay, direct my argument to you. But how do they know you're in the country illegally? They could just make that claim and about you, an American citizen, and ship you to some prison in South America, and you say, oh, you've got it wrong, I'm actually not. Well, that's why you need due process. The burden is on them to prove that you are not an American citizen, a legal migrant who has committed crime. The burden is on them to prove that, not on you to prove that you did nothing wrong. They have to make the case first, or else it just doesn't work, or else we've empowered the government to grab and disappear people.
Well, and in the Mahmoud Khalil case, although he is not a citizen, the people who first came to arrest him appear to have believed he was still on a student visa, and then he produced a green card. So I think all of those points are important, and I think also in relation to the situation of the Venezuelans being deported, it's worth reiterating that the specifics of that, as far as the Alien Enemies Act are concerned, that the government's case there depends upon the idea that people are invading the country, and that Tren De Aragua has in some fashion become a hybrid government with the actual government of Venezuela. I think that's a tenuous argument, but if you're not even a gang member of Tren De Aragua, obviously that all falls apart completely.
Well, we are off to a harmonious start. I don't know how long that will hold, because we've got a lot of fascinating subjects to get into today. The Democratic Party is, of course, facing pressure yet again to change course and perhaps change its leadership. We'll discuss more Rising right after this.